say one of the world's greatest wonders wasn't built for power, nor for glory, but for love. A king raised an entire mountain of life in the middle of the desert, all for a woman who missed the scent of home. This is a story of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a paradise suspended in time, where rivers float above the earth and trees touch the heavens. Scholars still debate whether it truly existed or if it bloomed only in legend. Yet beneath the mystery lies a tale of devotion so deep it reshaped the very sands of Mesopotamia. If you love wandering through the myths and wonders that time almost forgot, make sure to subscribe and let's uncover the beauty and secrets hidden in the past, together. Imagine walking through Babylon at dawn, the air warm and heavy with the scent of distant rivers, the hum of traders, and the distant shimmer of tiled walls reflecting sunlight. The city stood as a symbol of civilization's peak, a place of knowledge, language, and power. Yet among its splendor, one story rose above them all. The Hanging Gardens. They weren't just gardens, they were a miracle. An oasis carved into stone, where plants cascaded from terraces like waterfalls, fed by mysterious waters that defied the desert's thirst. Some said the gardens were built for love, a gift from King Nebuchadnezzar II to his homesick Queen Amadis, who longed for the green mountains of her distant homeland. Others believed it was more than romance, that the gardens were a symbol of divine ambition, an attempt to recreate the heavens on earth, to rival the gods themselves. Ancient writers spoke of columns hidden by vines, of towering arches veiled in shade, where cool mist hung in the air and birds sang among foreign flowers. The gardens, they said, seemed alive, not just a structure of stone, but a breathing thing, growing from the heart of Babylon like a dream refusing to die. Travelers from far lands came to witness it. They returned home with stories too beautiful to be believed. Tales of a mountain of greenery rising from the sands. Some called it the eighth wonder, though it was counted among the seven. It was unlike anything the world had ever seen, or perhaps would ever see again. The Greek historians wrote about it, Strabo described its terraces layered like steps to the sky, while Diodorus told of mechanical wonders that lifted water upward. But for every word written, another was lost. For every witness who claimed to see it, another doubted it ever existed. History became tangled in myth. Archaeologists have searched for centuries, digging through the dust of Babylon, seeking the faint trace of roots, the curve of a wall, the mark of an irrigation system. They found palaces, temples, and but no undeniable sign of the gardens themselves. No inscription, no plan, no foundation strong enough to hold such majesty. Some began to wonder if the gardens had been a dream, or worse, a story stolen from another empire and woven into Babylon's legacy. Yet the idea endures, because humanity needs such stories. Visions of beauty built against all odds, gardens that bloom in the unlikeliest of places. Imagine the sound of flowing water echoing through stone corridors, sunlight flickering across hanging vines, and a queen walking beneath them, lost in the scent of home. Even if it never existed, it still feels real, like a memory of paradise our world once had, or perhaps still longs to find again. And so the Hanging Gardens of Babylon remain suspended, not in the sky, but in time itself, forever hanging between history and myth. Maybe that's why they still captivate us. Not because we can prove they existed, but because we want to believe that somewhere, beauty like that once did. The ruins of Babylon may have crumbled, but the story of the gardens endures, a reminder that even in decay, wonder can survive. Each generation retells it differently, some as a love story, others as a symbol of ambition. But beneath it all lies the same truth: humanity's yearning to create paradise. As the desert winds whisper through the ancient plains, you can almost hear the rustle of leaves, the trickle of water, and the echo of something sacred long gone. It's said that when the sun sets over the ruins, the stones themselves remember. Faint outlines of terraces cast in shadow, like ghosts of the gardens once alive. And perhaps that's all the proof we need. Not carved in stone, but living in imagination, kept alive by every storyteller who refuses to let it fade. Because the real Hanging Gardens of Babylon might not be found by archaeologists, but by dreamers, historians, and those who still believe in beauty beyond time. When we speak of the Hanging Gardens, we speak not of walls and water, but of hope, the kind that makes people build mountains just to touch the heavens. If the winds of Babylon could talk, they'd tell of love, ambition, and a city that dared to make the impossible bloom in the desert's heart. And as we close this chapter tonight, remember, sometimes the greatest wonders aren't those we can touch, but those we can never quite let go of. The Hanging Gardens may have fallen, but their legend still climbs eternally upward, through the ruins of memory, toward the light of imagination. Scholars still debate the truth of the Hanging Gardens, whether they were real, imagined, or lost to the shifting sands of time. Yet the more we search, the more the mystery deepens. Some experts suggest the gardens weren't in Babylon at all, but far to the north, in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, ruled by King Sennacherib, a visionary builder of his age. His city had advanced canals, aqueducts, and terraces, proof that great greenery could flourish even in the heart of a harsh land. Could the legend have simply migrated south? Ancient scribes might have confused the cities, merging memories and myths, until history could no longer tell where truth ended and imagination began. The Hanging Gardens, then, might have been a collective dream, a vision of paradise shared by many cultures longing for green in a world of dust. Still, Babylon's grandeur cannot be denied. Its massive gates, golden lions, and towers stretching to heaven all spoke of human pride that sought to rival the divine. It's not hard to believe that in such a city, a king might build something so wondrous that future generations could scarcely describe it without awe. Imagine slaves and craftsmen hauling stone under the burning sun, assembling terraces that rose like steps to the sky, each one filled with soil brought from distant mountains. Each level was said to hold trees, flowers, and vines from across the empire, a living collection of every color and scent imaginable. The sound of water flowing through hidden pipes filled the air, cooling the stone and feeding the roots that hung down like emerald curtains. Engineers might have used an ancient form of the Archimedes screw, rotating continuously to lift water from the Euphrates to the highest terrace. From below, it must have seemed like magic, a river flowing upward, defying gravity, keeping life alive in a place the desert tried to reclaim. The scent of blooming jasmine, the hum of bees, the shade of palms, all mingling above the city's dust and noise, creating a world apart from Babylon's heat. For the queen, it must have felt like stepping into her homeland again. Green hills and cool air recreated by the hands of love and power. At night, the stars mirrored in pools of water, and the city lights below seemed to merge with the heavens, earth, and sky becoming one. Priests might have performed rituals among the vines, offering prayers to Ishtar, goddess of love and fertility, thanking her for beauty that defied nature itself. The people must have gazed upward and wondered if the gods had descended, for what else could explain a garden floating in the sky? Ebony in ruin centuries later, travelers spoke of towering foundations and strange structures that seemed too grand to belong to mortals. The air around the ruins of Babylon still hums with that mystery, a quiet echo of life that once thrived where now only sand and silence remain. The Hanging Gardens remind us of something deeply human, the desire to preserve beauty, to resist time, to make life bloom even where it shouldn't. It's a message as timeless as the legend itself, that even in a crumbling world, there's always room to plant something new, something living. As the years passed, Babylon fell. The river changed its course. The walls turned to dust, and the terraces, if they ever stood, were swallowed by history. Yet, the story survived. From scholar to poet, from clay tablet to printed page, the memory of those gardens continued to grow. Perhaps it was never about the plants or the stones, but about the dream of creating paradise, where none existed before. Each retelling waters that dream again, keeping it alive in the collective heart of humanity. Maybe that's why the Hanging Gardens endure while other wonders fade, because they weren't just built, they were imagined. And imagination never truly dies. If we close our eyes, we can still see them. The golden light filtering through leaves, the murmur of flowing water, the queen's laughter echoing through the air. History is a garden of its own, filled with roots of truth and branches of myth, all tangled together in the soil of memory. The Hanging Gardens lie somewhere between those roots, half real, half dream, fully eternal. Somewhere, perhaps under layers of dust, The stones still remember the rhythm of footsteps, the cool touch of rain that never fell. And maybe one day, an explorer will uncover a fragment, a carved tile, a buried wall proof that the impossible once stood against the desert wind. Until then, the legend continues to grow, watered by wonder and nourished by curiosity. We keep returning to it, not for answers, but for the feeling it gives that humanity, even in its oldest stories, never stopped reaching for the sky. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon remain one of history's most beautiful questions. A living paradox between fact and fantasy. They teach us that not every truth needs proof, and not every beauty needs to be seen to be believed. In the end, the gardens may not hang in the air, they hang in our imagination, swaying gently with every retelling. The walls of Babylon have fallen, but the dream still climbs through art, through words, through time itself. Each generation plants its own version, hoping that in some small way, paradise can bloom again. Perhaps that's what makes the Hanging Gardens eternal, not their existence, but their persistence in our minds and hearts. And if we listen closely, beyond the silence of centuries, we might still hear the faint trickle of water, flowing upward through the sands of history. That sound, imagined or not, reminds us of humanity's oldest truth, that wonder never dies. It only is waiting for us to rediscover it, because in the ruins of Babylon, under sun and sand, something still grows, the undying seed of all. And as long as we keep telling the story, the Hanging Gardens will never truly disappear. They will bloom again each time we remember them, in every whisper of wind, every painted sky, every dream of paradise reborn. For in the end, legends like these don't need to be found. They simply need to be believed. And maybe that belief, that spark of wonder that never fades, is the real miracle of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. They say every great wonder begins with a dream, and the Hanging Gardens were no exception. A vision so lush it defied gravity, so mysterious that history still argues about who dared to create it. Many believe the answer lies with King Nebuchadnezzar II, a ruler of vast ambition and heart. Under his command, Babylon rose like a jewel in the desert, shimmering with towers, gates, and endless pride. Nebuchadnezzar's story often intertwines with love. His queen, Amethyst of Media, came from green mountains and cool breezes. When she married into the dust and heat of Babylon, her heart longed for home. And so, legend says, the king built her paradise. Terraces of life stacked toward heaven, where vines draped over balconies, and the scent of lilies floated above the sand. Some historians find this tale too poetic to be real, too tender for an age of conquest. Yet, isn't that what makes it worth retelling? A fragment of love beneath the empire's shadow? No tablet has yet been found that says, "Here grew the Hanging Gardens." No carving shows Amethyst gazing through leaves. Only scattered writings hint at the miracle that may have once been. Still, Nebuchadnezzar's power was undeniable. He was a builder beyond compare. His name carved into temple walls. His ambition written in the blue-glazed bricks of Babylon is a mighty-ish gate. He built ziggurats that touched clouds and temples for gods, whose names we barely whisper today. So when stories claimed he built a garden that floated, it didn't seem impossible. The Babylonians mastered irrigation long before aqueducts carried water through Rome. They turned deserts green, bending rivers to their will. To them, raising a mountain of gardens might have been only another challenge. But here's the twist. Some scholars say the gardens weren't in Babylon at all. They claimed the wonder belonged to another king, Sennacherib of Assyria, ruling far to the north. Sennacherib was no less proud than Nebuchadnezzar. In Nineveh, he boasted of palaces with marble floors and canals that brought life into the heart of his city. His engineers were unmatched. His own inscriptions describe a marvel for all nations. A garden of terraces watered by devices of bronze, hidden deep within the walls. Could this be the true Hanging Gardens? If so, the world has spent centuries giving credit to the wrong king. Yet, perhaps both rulers shared a vision to make paradise from stone and water from dry air. When the Greeks first heard of these wonders, they couldn't help but embellish. They imagined vines trailing over balconies and exotic birds singing among columns shining with golden light. To them, the hanging gardens became a symbol of human triumph over nature, and naturally, they added love, tragedy, and divine ambition to complete the tale. History, after all, loves drama. Yet, between poetry and proof lies the truth, buried in dust. Archaeologists have found traces of ancient irrigation channels and massive foundations, hints, perhaps, of the structure time has swallowed. Somewhere beneath the sands of Iraq or Syria may sleep the bones of that green giant. Its bricks eroded, its roots long vanished, its story waiting patiently to be read. It's strange how the grandest creations fade without leaving a whisper of certainty. Empires crumble, languages die, and yet a rumor of beauty continues to live in the world. Essay Margination. If Nebuchadnezzar truly built it, then love became an architect. If Sennacherib did, then pride built paradise. Either way, both men turned the ordinary desire for beauty into something eternal. Perhaps it doesn't matter whose hands placed the first stone. What matters is that humanity once dreamed of bringing the mountains to the desert, of giving green life to lifeless dust. Still, you can picture Nebuchadnezzar standing among his terraces, the morning sun burning gold over the horizon. Water trickles down the steps as servants tend trees that rise higher than his crown. Amethyst might walk beside him, her eyes softening at the sight. For a moment, the wind smells like home again, and the distance between kingdoms dissolves in the perfume of flowers. Or maybe it was Sennacherib, surveying his mechanical marvels with pride. His gardens didn't need love. They were monuments to intellect, invention, and the will to master nature itself. Both stories sound equally human. Both mix arrogance with art, and both remind us that beauty often springs from a longing for control over the heart, over time, over death. What fascinates scholars most isn't the garden's size or splendor, but their mystery. How could such an enormous structure vanish without trace, leaving behind only legend and speculation? It's as if history deliberately covered its tracks, letting the sand reclaim the bricks, the rivers reroute their flow, and the plants turn back to dust where they once defied it. Every generation since has tried to rebuild it in the mind, artists painting what they cannot prove, historians arguing over what they cannot find. It's the world's most elegant puzzle. The idea that such beauty could disappear unsettles us. It whispers that even the grandest creations, no matter how green or glorious, are never stronger than time's slow patience. Still, there's something comforting in the thought that people thousands of years ago loved and dreamed like we do now. The hanging gardens were proof that wonder was once within reach. When we talk about them today, we aren't just studying ruins. We're tracing a feeling, that strange mixture of awe and yearning that makes the past shimmer, even when it's gone. If you listen closely, maybe you can still hear the echo of footsteps on ancient stone, the murmur of water pulled upward by unseen hands, the whisper of leaves against sunlight, and perhaps that's the true legacy of whoever built them. That centuries later, people still pause, close their eyes, and imagine the impossible made real for just a heartbeat. No statue of Nebuchadnezzar stands unbroken. No inscription names the gardeners who watered those roots. Yet, somehow, their creation continues to bloom in the mind of every curious soul. So maybe both kings deserve credit. One for dreaming of paradise, the other for building it, or perhaps neither existed. And the gardens themselves were the invention of human hope. History, like a storyteller, has a habit of exaggerating the truth to make it easier to love. And so the legend grew vines that time could never prune. The Greeks, Romans, and scholars that followed carried the story across continents. Each added something, a new terrace, a new myth, a new reason to believe in the impossible. Even today, the hanging gardens remain a mirror for our imagination. Every era recreates them differently, shaped by what it values most: love, technology, or the audacity to dream. Perhaps the garden's true builders were neither Nebuchadnezzar nor Sennacherib, but time itself weaving stories, until fact and fable became indistinguishable beneath the same warm desert sun. It's easy to forget that behind every myth lies a memory. The hanging gardens endure not because they stood, but because we keep building them again and again in our minds. So maybe the next time someone asks who built them, the real answer is simple: wielded every dreamer who refused to let beauty disappear without a fight. And that, perhaps, is what the ancients would have wanted, not proof, not credit, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing that paradise, Ebeni Machened, was worth remembering forever. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, whether real or dreamed, remind us that even ruins can grow flowers in the hearts of those who still believe in wonder. Centuries passed, and the once great city of Babylon slowly sank beneath its own dust. Its rivers changed course, its walls crumbled, and the echo of its glory dimmed into silence. Travelers came and went, speaking of a lost paradise that no one could find anymore. Some said the gods took it back, unwilling to let mortals live among such perfection. Others believed the gardens still existed, buried deep beneath the ruins, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. Not with vines, but with memory and imagination. By the time the Greek historians arrived, Babylon was already a shadow. They listened to whispers from old men in markets and scribes in temples, piecing together fragments of wonder. Herodotus, often called the father of history, never mentioned the gardens at all. Perhaps he doubted them. Perhaps, like dreams, they were too delicate to survive in writing. But later writers, like Strabo and Philo of Byzantium, could not resist the temptation. They described terraces stacked high, with water flowing endlessly from hidden machinery deep within. They imagined trees that reached the heavens and flowers that never wilted, kept alive by ingenious systems of pulleys, screws, and reservoirs. The Hanging Gardens became both science and magic. Their words painted what time had erased. And so, for thousands of years, readers imagined an emerald mountain rising from golden sand, a miracle crafted by human hands. As empires rose and fell, the story of the Hanging Gardens never disappeared. Like a seed caught in the wind, it drifted through languages, ages, and civilizations, always finding new soil. In medieval times, travelers spoke of Babylon as a cursed city. They said the garden's disappearance was punishment for pride, proof that beauty built on arrogance cannot last. Yet others saw it differently. They believed it was an act of mercy, that the gods took the gardens to a higher realm, where time and decay could never touch them. Poets turned the legend into allegory. The gardens became a symbol of lost love, human vanity, and the eternal yearning to bring heaven down to earth. In every telling, something changed. The names, the places, the details, but the feeling remained. A quiet ache, the kind that hums in the soul long after the words fade. Then came the modern age, when archaeology replaced mythology. Men with brushes and maps walked the sands of Iraq, hoping to find proof beneath layers of forgotten time. They uncovered the grand walls of Babylon, the blue bricks of the Ishtar Gate, and the remains of palaces once touched by kings. Yet no terraces, no vines, no flowing waters. For a moment, it seemed the Hanging Gardens had never existed at all, that they were nothing but a story told too often to question. But history has a way of playing hide and seek. In 1899, excavations led by Robert Koldewey uncovered strange vaults near the palace, massive stone chambers unlike anything else nearby. He believed he had found the foundation of the gardens themselves, an underground network that once supported terraces above, strong enough to hold both trees and dreams. Others disagreed. They said Koldewey's discovery was only a storage hall or a temple, misread by the hopeful eyes of someone who wanted to find paradise too badly. Still, his enthusiasm reignited the legend. Scholars once more began to debate, measure, and wonder. Could the gardens truly have stood here, beside the Euphrates, beneath Babylon's shimmering heat? Then a new theory emerged, one that pointed not to Babylon, but to Nineveh, hundreds of miles away. It challenged centuries of belief, and yet it made surprising sense. In Nineveh, evidence of advanced irrigation systems and elevated aqueducts suggested something remarkable had existed there. Some even found inscriptions describing a wonder for all people. This matched the ancient accounts almost perfectly. Gardens raised high, watered by mysterious devices. It was as if the story had simply drifted south, carried by storytellers and time. If true, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were never in Babylon at all. They were in another empire entirely, mistaken through centuries of translation and myth. Imagine the irony. A wonder of the world misplaced by history, its name attached to the wrong city, the wrong king, and the wrong story. But maybe that's the beauty of it? The truth changes shape depending on who tells it, and the gardens, like myths themselves, were never meant to stay in one place. Perhaps they survive best, not in stone, but in imagination, a place that never dies, never crumbles, and never stops growing as long as someone still believes. In this way, the Hanging Gardens have become eternal, not through preservation, but through wonder. Every retelling waters them again, letting new blossoms bloom in the garden of memory. Maybe that's why the legend refuses to die, because it speaks to something deeply human. The desire to build beauty in barren places, to keep love alive through creation. When you close your eyes and picture the gardens, you might see a woman standing among cascading vines, sunlight flickering on her face, her sadness finely softened by green and water. Or perhaps you see an engineer, hands stained with clay, watching in satisfaction as his invention brings life to the desert, his heart swelling with pride, not poetry. Each image is true in its own way, because every listener adds a piece of themselves to the story. That's how legends grow, watered by countless imaginations. The gardens may have vanished, but their idea lives on in hanging plants on balconies, in rooftop gardens, in every attempt to make nature climb toward the sky. Even modern architects pay silent tribute, building vertical forests on towers of glass and steel, echoing that same ancient dream of making the impossible green again. It's as if we're all still trying to rebuild the Hanging Gardens, not in Babylon, but in our cities, our art, and our longing for something higher than ourselves. Because deep down, we still chase the same question the ancients did. Can human hands create something so beautiful that even time hesitates before touching it? Maybe that's why the mystery never ends. The Hanging Gardens are less a location and more a feeling. A quiet proof that love, ambition, and wonder can shape the world. So whether Nebuchadnezzar built them for a Midas or Sennacherib built them for glory, both reached for the same truth. That paradise, however brief, is worth every drop of effort. And if the gardens truly never existed, that might make them even more powerful. A reminder that sometimes imagination alone can build wonders no stone could ever match. The real Hanging Gardens might be the stories we tell, the art we make, the way we still dream of color where none should grow. As night falls, you can almost picture it, a mountain of greenery glowing under moonlight, water trickling softly, the scent of jasmine drifting through warm desert air. No walls, no ruins, no historians, only silence and wind, moving gently through the leaves of memory. A paradise not lost, but resting, waiting to be dreamed again. And perhaps, in some quiet corner of time, the Hanging Gardens still stand untouched, unseen, and perfect, forever alive in the imagination of those who close their eyes and believe. They say the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Yet no one truly knows where they stood, or if they ever existed at all. Archaeologists have searched for centuries, digging beneath the sands of modern-day Iraq, tracing every fragment of stone, every broken inscription, hoping to find proof of the world's most mysterious garden. Babylon itself lies near the modern city of Hilla, beside the Euphrates River. It was once the heart of a powerful empire, filled with temples, ziggurats, and monuments that touched the heavens. But when explorers began excavating Babylon's ruins, something was missing. They found grand walls, palaces, and statues, yet no trace of the vast terraces described in ancient texts. Greek historians like Strabo and Philo of Byzantium describe the gardens vividly: lush trees rising from stone steps, water flowing from hidden channels, flowers blooming in impossible abundance. However, none of the cuneiform tablets unearthed in Babylon mention such a structure. The silence of those records puzzled scholars deeply. How could such a wonder leave no written trace? Some began to suspect that the gardens might not have been in Babylon at all, that perhaps history had misremembered their location across centuries of retelling and translation. One theory places the Hanging Gardens in Nineveh, far to the north, a city once ruled by the Assyrian king Sennacherib, who was known for his remarkable feats of engineering. In his inscriptions, Sennacherib boasted of building a wondrous garden, a marvel with water-raising machines and terraces filled with trees from distant lands. It sounded strikingly similar to Babylon's legend. He even described an aqueduct system that carried water across miles of desert terrain, a feat that closely resembled the mechanisms once believed to have sustained Babylon's gardens. If Sennacherib's garden in Nineveh was the true inspiration, then the mystery deepens further. How did such a wonder become credited to Babylon and its legendary King Nebuchadnezzar? It might have been a case of mistaken identity. Or perhaps, ancient writers simply merged tales of two great cities into one timeless myth that survived through storytelling. After all, both Babylon and Nineveh were centers of awe and power, symbols of grandeur that defined the Mesopotamian world. It's easy to see how their stories could intertwine. When Greek historians traveled east centuries later, they likely heard fragments of both legends, a garden in one city, a king in another, and stitched them together into one tale. This blending of history and myth was not unusual. Ancient writers often valued beauty and wonder over accuracy, turning memory into legend and legend into eternal truth. In modern times, archaeologists like Sir Austen Henry Layard explored the ruins of Nineveh, discovering vast palace walls decorated with carvings of lush landscapes and flowing water. Those reliefs showed trees, terraces, and irrigation channels, visual echoes of the same descriptions given to the Hanging Gardens. It was as if the stones themselves whispered forgotten truths. Nearby, remnants of Sennacherib's aqueduct were uncovered, built with thousands of carved stones, a network that once carried water across barren land. Toward his great capital, the structure stood as proof of advanced hydraulic engineering, an accomplishment capable of sustaining massive gardens, even in the arid plains of Assyria. If the Hanging Gardens truly stood there in Nineveh, it would mean they were never part of Babylon's skyline at all, but of an entirely different empire. Yet, the romantic image of Babylon, with its golden walls and soaring ziggurats, refused to fade. People preferred to believe the gardens bloomed in Nebuchadnezzar's magnificent city. The name Babylon itself carried more magic, a word that conjured visions of glory, decadence, and divine ambition. To lose the gardens from Babylon was to lose part of that wonder. And so, even as evidence pointed elsewhere, the myth held firm. The world kept calling them the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, preserving the poetry over the truth. Still, modern research continued. Satellite imagery and new excavation methods revealed more of ancient Mesopotamia's buried secrets, offering glimpses of water systems once thought impossible for their time. One of these discoveries included canals that may have fed into the Euphrates, perhaps once part of a network designed to irrigate palace gardens beyond the city walls. Archaeologists debate whether these remnants could belong to Nebuchadnezzar's reign, suggesting the gardens might have stood near the riverbank, where fertile soil and water were abundant. But time has erased most traces. Centuries of floods, wars, and shifting sands swallowed Babylon's glory, leaving only foundations and fragments to warn to speak clearly. Travelers in later ages described the ruins as haunting vast mounds of earth scattered across endless plains, where even silence seemed heavy with lost stories. Some imagined the gardens once stood near the great ziggurat of Etemenanki, the temple that inspired the biblical Tower of Babel, a fitting companion to a paradise built for gods. If that were true, then perhaps both structures shared a symbolic purpose: to bridge earth and heaven, uniting humanity's reach with divine creation through architecture and ambition. Even the absence of evidence has become part of the allure. The garden's disappearance makes them feel sacred, a beauty so perfect that time itself chose to conceal it. For many historians, the mystery is as captivating as any discovery could be. It transforms the Hanging Gardens into something greater than ruins, a legend that still grows unseen. In a way, every search for them becomes a reflection of humanity's desire to preserve wonder, to find proof that magic once lived upon the earth. Today, as archaeologists dig and historians debate, artists continue to paint and dream of those terraces. Imagining the sound of water trickling through leaves in the desert heat, they see Nebuchadnezzar walking beside his queen, smiling as she touches the flowers that remind her of home, a love story woven into the bricks of Babylon. Or they imagine Sennacherib, proud and visionary, watching water climb the heights of his palace as his engineers bow before a miracle of invention. Whichever king it truly was, Both share the same legacy, the will to create paradise where none should exist, to make nature bloom under human hands. And that is perhaps why the Hanging Gardens endure. Whether in Babylon or Nineveh, they are more than a place. They are proof of humanity's refusal to accept limits. When the desert wind blows across the ruins, carrying dust and whispers of old empires, it feels as though the gardens still breathe beneath the earth, waiting to be found. The Euphrates still flows, its waters reflecting a golden sunset, much like it did thousands of years ago, when men dreamed of shaping rivers and raising green mountains to the sky. Somewhere under the soil, the truth sleeps. Fragments of brick, a bead wall, or perhaps just the memory of a dream, too beautiful to survive the weight of time. And so the search continues, year after year. Scientists measure, historians argue, and poets listen. Hope in the past might one day reveal the place where wonder once took root. Maybe one day, a new discovery will rewrite the story. Or maybe the legend is destined to remain unsolved, a mystery that keeps the world forever enchanted by its silence. For now, the Hanging Gardens remain suspended, not in Babylon's air, but in the imagination, a miracle built from memory, myth, and the human heart's endless hunger for paradise. The more we search for the Hanging Gardens, the clearer it becomes that they may never be found. At least not in the way we imagine them, standing proud under the Babylonian sun. Perhaps they were not a single place, but a symbol, a story shared across empires, echoing the longing to bring life where only dust once ruled. Ancient people revered water as sacred, and in the deserts of Mesopotamia, it meant survival, power, and beauty. The idea of a man-made paradise must have felt divine. To lift water upward against gravity was almost a spiritual act. It was as if humankind dared to challenge the heavens by making the desert bloom with green life. If we think of it that way, then every irrigation canal, every carefully placed terrace, was not just engineering, it was worship through creation. Some scholars suggest that the Hanging Gardens may have been destroyed long before Greek historians ever heard of them, leaving only whispers that grew brighter as the truth faded. Like smoke twisting from an ancient fire, the legend traveled across lands and generations, reshaped by each storyteller who wished to make the memory live again. Even the word hanging may have been a mistranslation, not plants dangling from ropes, but terraces rising upward, layer by layer, as if the earth itself climbed toward the heavens. Such imagery, once painted in the minds of poets, was impossible to forget. They wrote of it not as a structure, but as a dream, a vision of perfect harmony. Imagine standing before those terraces at dusk, the air fragrant with jasmine, the sound of water echoing through stone arches, and the city's hum fading into distant silence. Birds would have flown between the trees, nesting among vines that draped from marble balustrades, while sunlight scattered through mist and leaves in shimmering rays. Every step upward would reveal new wonders: pomegranates, cypress trees, lilies. Each terrace, a world of its own, built to soothe the eyes and soul of a homesick queen. The legend says Nebuchadnezzar built it for Midas, who missed the green mountains of her homeland. In the desert, he gave her a piece of paradise. Whether that story is true or not, it endures because it feels human. Behind every monument of stone, there is always a heart that longed to make someone happy. It's that emotion, love, shaping the landscape that makes the Hanging Gardens timeless, no matter where they truly stood. Some modern architects have even tried to recreate them, designing vertical gardens that stretch along skyscrapers and city walls, merging technology with ancient inspiration. These new creations, Togmoderan, carry the same spirit, defying nature's boundaries, chasing the same dream that once echoed through the plains of Babylon. In that sense, perhaps the gardens never truly vanished. They've simply evolved, following humanity wherever it goes, finding new soil to grow in. Each time a seed is planted where it shouldn't thrive, the dream continues. The same ancient desire to make beauty bloom in impossible places. Archaeologists still hope to find the proof. Each dig beneath Babylon's sands brings them closer. One layer of time peeled away to reveal another chapter of history. They uncover foundations, old irrigation systems, and bits of clay once shaped by human hands that believed they were building eternity. And in those fragments, perhaps, lies the real Hanging Garden. not as walls or terraces, but as evidence of our endless longing to outlive time through creation. When you walk through the ruins today, you won't see flowers or fountains, only wind and dust swirling where rivers once sang through stone. Yet, if you listen closely, that same wind seems to carry echoes. Laughter, footsteps, the rustle of palm leaves in forgotten courtyards. It's as if the past refuses to stay buried. The gardens still whisper, "We were here once." We bloomed where none believed life could thrive, so may travelers who stood among the ruins describe feeling an inexplicable calm, as though the silence itself remembers what it means to be alive. It's a strange kind of peace, not sadness, but reverence. The feeling that beauty, even when gone, leaves an imprint on the soul of the world. And that imprint stretches beyond Babylon, beyond Nineveh, reaching into the stories we tell, the art we make, the dreams we pass on in quiet wonder. Because in the end, the Hanging Gardens were never just about stone and water. They were about the human spirit refusing to accept the limits of its world. They remind us that imagination can turn dry earth into paradise, and that sometimes what we cannot prove still shapes who we are. Every civilization that came after Babylon carried a piece of that lesson, that beauty can rise even in ruin, and life can find a way in the harshest of places. Perhaps that is why, thousands of years later, the legend still feels alive, because it tells us that the pursuit of wonder is as eternal as the stars above. The ruins of Mesopotamia may rest under layers of dust and silence, but their spirit breathes in the stories that survive, retold by dreamers and scholars alike. For as long as someone wonders where the Hanging Gardens once stood, they will never truly be lost. They will live in that question, forever suspended between myth and memory. And maybe that's how they were meant to survive, not as stone, but as a mystery, keeping the imagination alive through centuries of change and forgetting. Each unanswered question makes the story more alive, pulling us deeper into its quiet riddle, a treasure map without an X, guiding us by curiosity alone. Even if one day the sands shift and reveal their true remains, part of us might still prefer the mystery, the comfort of wonder over the certainty of fact, because mystery has its own kind of peace. It lets us dream freely, to fill the unknown with the colors of our own imagination. And so the Hanging Gardens continue to grow, not in Babylon's soil, but in the minds of those who believe that even legends deserve to be kept alive. When night falls over the desert, and the moonlight glints across ancient stones, it's easy to picture their shadow. Terraces glowing faintly, as if still breathing beneath the stars. Maybe the gods were never angry that humans built such beauty. Maybe they smiled, knowing the gardens would outlast even the empires that created them, not in matter, but in memory. So the story remains, a promise whispered through time, that no wonder ever truly dies, as long as there is someone who dares to imagine it once more. Even now, perhaps in some corner of the world, where water meets stone and vines creep toward sunlight, the spirit of Babylon's garden still watches us dream. And if you ever stand under a hanging vine, feeling the air heavy with scent and warmth, maybe, just maybe, you'll feel that ancient paradise bloom again. Because the truth is, we never lost the Hanging Gardens. We only learned to carry them within us. Wherever our hearts choose to make beauty bloom. No one truly knows how the Hanging Gardens of Babylon worked, but the mystery itself is what makes them timeless. A marvel of human ingenuity whispered through sand, scroll, and silence. Ancient writers describe water flowing uphill, trees swaying hundreds of feet above the desert floor, and terraced mountains built by human hands where once there was only dust. It sounds like a dream, yet too many accounts hint at something real. A wonder so complex that even modern engineers still wonder how such a miracle was achieved. The first clue lies in water, the source of all life. In a world defined by drought, to lift water high above the ground was both divine and defiant. Some say the Babylonians mastered hydraulics before anyone else. They built systems that carried the Euphrates River's water upward, using mechanical genius that would not be seen again for centuries. Ancient texts mention a chain of buckets, perhaps an early form of the Archimedes screw, long before Archimedes himself, ropes, pulleys, and rotating mechanisms powered by slaves or animals. This chain, constantly turning, would scoop water from the river below, lifting it into vast cisterns that fed smaller channels winding through the garden's terraces. From these reservoirs, water would trickle down through carefully carved stone channels, nourishing each layer with precision, ensuring not a single drop went to waste. Imagine it a soft murmur of flowing water echoing through columns of stone, droplets glinting in the sun as vines draped over terraces like emerald curtains. At the top, great pools shimmered under the Babylonian sun, reflecting palm trees and blue skies, the heart of a living mountain sculpted by human hands. The structure itself was as breathtaking as the plants it held. Ancient writers described it as a massive series of ascending platforms supported by pillars and vaults. Each level was layered with stone, reeds, and thick soil to hold the roots of trees, while beneath ran hidden chambers that channeled water through ingenious design. The walls, said to be broad enough for chariots to pass, were lined with bitumen to seal moisture, preventing the slow decay that ruins most great works of men. The Babylonians had mastered more than beauty. They had mastered endurance architecture that fought the desert, the sun, and time itself, all in one silent harmony. Above, the terraces bloomed with olive trees, fig trees, and exotic plants brought from distant lands, gifts to a queen who longed for the mountains of home. Each plant was chosen carefully, not just for its beauty, but for its ability to thrive in that delicate balance between desert heat and human invention. Engineers would have had to calculate every angle, every flow, ensuring the water reached even the highest root without flooding the levels below. It was a living system, part machine, part miracle, and in its heart pulsed the rhythm of human curiosity, pushing against what nature allowed. Some say the air itself inside the gardens was cooler, as if the water and plants created a small paradise, a reprieve from Babylon's scorching heat. Visitors described it as stepping into another world, one where time slowed, sound softened, and even the harshest hearts found peace among the dripping leaves. Imagine the workers maintaining this wonder, climbing ladders, tending trees, repairing channels under the watchful eye of priests who considered the garden a sacred bridge to the gods. The scent of wet earth and myrrh would have filled the air, mingling with the distant hum of the city, the market cries, the songs of traders and travelers. Each day, as the sun rose, the machinery would begin its endless rhythm, the creaking of ropes, the splash of buckets, the whisper of water flowing through stone. And at night, when torches lit the terraces, the gardens would glow softly, a shimmering beacon above the sleeping city, half temple, half dream. Some historians believe the structure was partially underground, allowing it to stay cool and preserve its water supply, while the upper levels bathed in golden sunlight. Others think it was built along the riverbank, so water could be lifted directly from the Euphrates, avoiding long, wasteful channels through the dry land. Every theory adds another layer to the legend, yet none can fully explain how such a wonder survived centuries of war, flood, and decay. Perhaps the answer lies not in engineering alone, but in faith, the belief that beauty itself was worth the effort, worth the risk of defying the desert. To create something so delicate, so precise, required not only skill but devotion, the kind that turns construction into worship. And so, beneath the mathematics of pulleys and gears, there was poetry, the unspoken desire to make the impossible real. Imagined the king himself standing on the highest terrace, gazing out at a city he ruled and a garden he built, his face lit by the reflection of water. In Tatkiet, maybe even he understood that power fades. Stone crumbles, but beauty endures when it touches the hearts of those who see it. The hanging gardens were not built to last forever. They were built to remind the world that even in desolation, the human spirit can create green miracles. Perhaps that's why they are still remembered, because in every culture, there is a yearning to lift life upward, to reach for the divine through the act of creation. The irrigation system itself must have been an endless dance. Too much water, and the soil would wash away. Too little, and the plants would wither. Every worker would have known the delicate balance, listening to the sound of the flow, adjusting ropes and levers like musicians tuning an instrument. Over time, the machinery must have worn down, wood warped, ropes frayed, metal rusted. Yet for decades, it continued to function through care and dedication. It's said the Babylonians even used bronze to reinforce parts of the structure, ensuring stability against the weight of soil, water, and trees. This was not a simple garden. It was an artificial mountain, rising from the plains, its every level alive with motion, sound, and the quiet labor of hands unseen. To those who saw it for the first time, it must have felt like stepping into the home of the gods, a mortal creation that rivaled divine artistry. And yet, beneath that grandeur, it was humble, built for love, sustained by effort, and bound by the simple wish to bring beauty into a harsh world. The Hanging Gardens stand as proof that even in ancient times, humans knew how to blend nature and technology into something that transcends both. Every drop that climbed those heights carried not just water, but meaning, the story of people who refused to accept the limits of their environment. And that story continues today. Every time someone builds a garden on a rooftop, a balcony, or a barren field, trying again to make life rise above, because to understand how the Hanging Gardens worked is to understand what drives humanity, not just engineering, but hope and the soft defiance of beauty. The ancient mechanisms may have stopped long ago, but the dream they powered still turns quietly in the hearts of all who seek to create paradise where none should exist. Over centuries, the Hanging Gardens became more than a monument. They became a metaphor. They represented the triumph of human will over nature's limits. A silent defiance written in stone and leaf. Travelers from distant lands spoke of the gardens as if they were alive, breathing, shimmering, whispering. Secrets of how earth, water, and time could coexist in perfect harmony. Some described the sound of water falling from one terrace to another, soft, endless, and soothing, a melody that lulled even the most restless travelers into a calm trance. At night, moonlight bathed the terraces in silver, turning every droplet of water into a star. The gardens became a mirror of heaven, suspended above the mortal world. Priests of Marduk would walk through the upper levels, offering prayers to the gods, believing that the constant flow of water symbolized divine favor upon the kingdom. It was said that when the wind passed through the vines, it carried voices, not of ghosts, but of blessings, as though the garden itself whispered gratitude to its makers. Some ancient records claimed the gardens were built by Queen not Nebuchadnezzar, suggesting that it was a woman's longing that gave birth to one of the world's greatest wonders. The Lagia says she missed her homeland's green hills, and so the king ordered the construction of a mountain in her honor, one made not of stone but of life. Every tree planted in those terraces carried a memory, a connection to lands far away, reminding the queen of the misty valleys and forests she once called home. The gardens, then, were not just an engineering marvel. They were an act of love, the ultimate gesture of devotion, carved into history and watered by affection. Archaeologists still debate whether the gardens truly existed in Babylon, or if they stood elsewhere, perhaps in Nineveh, under the rule of another king entirely. Some clay tablets discovered near the ruins of Nineveh describe lush terraces, complex irrigation, and royal gardens that match the ancient descriptions almost perfectly. If that is true, the Hanging Gardens might not have belonged to Babylon at all, but the myth attached itself there, as myths often do, drawn by the name's power. Regardless of location, the essence remains unchanged. Humanity creating paradise in defiance of its surroundings. Proof that dreams can bloom even in the driest soil. The irrigation system, whether powered by wheels or screws, was centuries ahead of its time. It reflected a deep understanding of hydraulics that would not reappear until the Greeks. Ancient engineers likely used bronze or copper fittings to reduce friction, allowing the water to flow smoothly through narrow channels carved with almost surgical precision. The lower levels were likely the heart of the system where the water was drawn, stored, and redistributed through hidden ducts and channels invisible to the casual eye. Beneath the beauty, there was constant motion, the hum of pulleys, the creak of wheels, and the rhythmic splash that never ceased as long as the garden lived. The system had to be maintained constantly. Dozens of workers, perhaps hundreds, labored daily to repair ropes, clean cisterns, and ensure that each level received enough moisture. Even a brief interruption could dry the upper terraces, and the loss of just one mechanism could spell ruin for the entire ecosystem delicately balanced above the city. The gardens were more than architecture. They were a living machine, a symphony of earth, water, and human effort working together in perpetual harmony. Imagine standing beneath one of the terraces, cool mist brushing your skin as sunlight filters through hanging vines, you'd forget the desert just beyond the city's walls. In those moments, one might understand why the Babylonians called it a wonder, not for its size alone, but for how it made the impossible feel utterly natural. The walls themselves were likely thick, layered with bitumen and reeds to hold the soil and prevent water from seeping out, an early form of environmental engineering. To support trees on elevated platforms required not only strength but foresight. They must have known how to balance soil, depth, moisture levels, and root stability. It is possible that the builders used a mix of stone, clay, and palm fiber to create a surface that could breathe while still holding immense weight. The result was a structure that mimicked nature itself, firm yet flexible, alive in its design, capable of withstanding floods, winds, and the test of time. In a world where most cities worshipped stone and sun, Babylon built a mountain of green, a sanctuary that proved civilization could coexist with nature, not conquer it. The gardens, to those who beheld them, were the very definition of abundance. Fruit-laden trees, flowering vines, and shimmering ponds that reflected the grandeur of human imagination. Birds from distant lands nested there, carried by trade routes and gentle winds, turning the terraces into an aviary where nature and empire met in quiet peace. Each morning, the light would strike the water lifts, sparkling like jewels, as workers began the day's cycle of keeping paradise alive in the heart of the desert. To her, the gardens were more than beauty. They were memory, love, and longing turned tangible, the scent of soil becoming the scent of home. Even today, the concept of the hanging gardens inspires architects, artists, and dreamers to imagine ways to bring nature back into the heart of human cities. Vertical gardens, rooftop farms, and suspended parks all trace their lineage back to that one ancient dream, a desire to raise green life toward the heavens. It's strange how the most ancient ideas often become the most modern again, looping through history like water through the same eternal channels. Though no ruins have been found beyond doubt, the descriptions remain too vivid, too consistent across centuries to dismiss as pure invention. The Greek historian Strabo described vaulted terraces, watered by mechanical means. Philo of Byzantium called it a marvel of art and ingenuity that defied the natural order. They may never have seen it themselves, but the fact that they believed speaks volumes. Myths survive only when they carry a seed of truth. Perhaps that truth is not in the bricks or the gardens themselves, but in what they represented. Humanity's endless wish to build something that touches eternity. The Hanging Gardens remind us that even in eras of conquest and empire, there existed hearts that sought not to destroy, but to nurture, to create, to heal. Each terrace was a statement that even in the harshest climates, beauty could thrive if only one dared to imagine it into existence. The Babylonians may not have known how long their creation would last, but they built as though it would outlive them, a gift to the ages. And in a way, it did. Though the stones are lost, the story remains, echoing across cultures, whispered in art, literature, and dreams. The Hanging Gardens were not just one of the seven wonders. They were a promise that civilization's highest purpose is not domination, but creation. Every detail, from the smallest leaf to the grandest terrace, carried intention. It was architecture designed not for power, but for peace and remembrance. As the centuries passed, empires fell, rivers shifted, and cities turned to dust, but the memory of those terraces refused to die. Even in ruin, the idea of the gardens continues to bloom, a seed that no flood, no flame, no time could ever truly erase. And so the story of how the Hanging Gardens worked is not a manual of mechanics, but a reflection of something deeper, how the human spirit always reaches upward. For in every age, there are dreamers who, like the builders of Babylon, will lift water to impossible heights, planting green miracles against the gray walls of time. Morning in Babylon began with the soft hum of life awakening beneath the desert sun. The air carried the scent of baked clay and sweet dates, blending warmth with quiet expectation. As the first light touched the ziggurat's peak, its golden bricks gleamed like dawn itself. Farmers stirred in the outer fields, tightening ropes around woven baskets filled with fresh grain. The Euphrates murmured nearby, its currents slow and dependable. Fishermen waded into its shallows, their nets glistening like silk threads as the first ripples of the day spread across the water. Within the city walls, narrow streets came alive. Merchants arranged baskets of onions, figs, and herbs, their voices calling out in rhythmic greetings that rose and fell with musical repetition. Children carried clay jars to the wells, laughter echoing between mud-brick homes. The splash of cool water broke the morning hush, mingling with the chatter of women gathered to share quiet stories. A potter's wheel began to turn, steady and sure. Clay took shape beneath practiced hands. Jars, cups, and lamps spun into being, guided by patience older than memory itself. In the shadow of a temple wall, a scribe knelt before a wooden board, pressing his stylus into damp clay. Every symbol he carved captured a moment of Babylon's endless hum. High above the bustling streets, the hanging gardens shimmered in the distance, though few had ever climbed their terraces. From below, they looked like a floating dream of green and mist. The sound of livestock echoed from the courtyards, goats bleating, donkeys braying, pigeons fluttering above the rooftops. Life was constant, layered, and unhurried, like an ancient song that never ended. Be mid-morning, the heat pressed gently upon the city. Families retreated indoors, closing red blinds to soften the glare. Inside, the light filtered golden, making everything seem still and slow. Artisans worked in shaded corners, mending sandals, weaving baskets, or engraving tiny designs into copper ornaments. Every craft carried the whisper of tradition, passed down from hand to hand. In the palace district, officials moved with quiet purpose. Scrolls changed hands, stamped with seals, while guards watched from shaded archways. Order in Babylon was maintained through rhythm, not rush. The scent of bread drifted once more, fresh loaves, pulled from clay ovens, crisp on the outside, soft within. Neighbors exchanged portions, nodding politely as they passed by. Along the river bank, children built small boats from reeds, setting them adrift like miniature dreams. Their laughter carried through the reeds as the boats swayed with the gentle current. Farmers returned from nearby canals, their sandals heavy with mud. They rested under fig trees, speaking little. The land was their teacher, patient, demanding, yet endlessly generous. A woman tended to her courtyard garden, pruning herbs and watering lilies from a jug. The leaves glistened under the fading morning light, tiny reflections of green hope against the stone. The ziggurat stood silent in the distance, massive and unwavering. From its top, one could see endless plains, the shimmer of faraway villages, and the faint outline of desert winds. In the marketplace, deals continued through the heat. Silver bracelets clinked as merchants gestured animatedly, their faces marked by sun and laughter. Every bargain was a story, told without haste. A group of travelers entered through the Ishtar Gate, awed by its blue-glazed bricks and lions in mid. To them, Babylon seemed alive, a breathing monument of human ambition. The midday sun burned white across the horizon. Birds circled lazily above the temples, and time itself seemed to stretch, slow and endless, like the wide sky over Mesopotamia. Families dined in the shade, lentils, bread, cucumbers, and goat cheese shared on woven mats. Conversation was soft, practical, and kind, drifting like wind over tall grass. As the afternoon deepened, music returned to the streets. A man played a lyre near a courtyard, its notes mellow and sweet, filling the alleys with gentle contentment. Babylon's walls, enormous and proud, guarded this serenity. Beyond them lay deserts and dust, but within there was color, life and the calm order of a civilization in bloom. A teacher gathered children under a fig tree. Unrolling a clay tablet etched with symbols, he taught them slowly, his tone patient. The words of the gods echoing through simple lessons. Water flowed through canals, guided by clever hands. It shimmered under the sun, feeding fields of barley and date palms. The sound of trickling water was the heartbeat of survival. In the distance, the hanging gardens caught a breeze. The vines swayed gently, a living tapestry of green against the dry sky. It was said the gods themselves envied its beauty. Workers climbed the terraces carrying baskets of soil. They sang low songs, the rhythm matching the creak of ropes and pulleys. Each tune told a story of labor, of love, of time. A child watched them, wondering if the garden truly touched the heavens. In Babylon, every myth had a seed of truth, and every truth shimmered with the edge of mystery. Evening shadows began to stretch. Merchants packed their goods. Farmers herded animals home, and the city sighed, its pulse slow as the sky turned deep amber. The air cooled, fragrant with distant cooking fires. Women stirred pots of lentil stew, adding herbs grown by the Euphrates. The sound of simmering water filled the dusk. Lanterns flickered in the doorways, their light trembling against walls etched by time. The laughter of children soft, replaced by quiet conversation and the rustle of sleeping mats. From the ziggurat's top, priests offered prayers to the setting sun. Their chants rolled gently over rooftops, echoing through courtyards, mingling with the last calls of distant birds. As twilight deepened, Babylon turned golden again, this time from firelight. The city glowed softly, like an ember refusing to die, like memory itself. Music returned faintly. A flute, maybe two. Notes rose into the star-filled air, twirling upward, drifting far beyond the city walls into the calm of the open night. The Euphrates shimmered beneath the moon. Fishermen still worked by its edge, lanterns reflecting on the water like captured stars. The river spoke to those who listened long enough. In the quiet homes, people lay on red mats, whispering stories to each other. Some spoke of God's Somaoth dreams, and some of the days that would follow just the same. A mother hummed to a child, a soft tune about the goddess Ishtar's love. Her voice lingered in the still air, gentle as a prayer, meant for no one in particular. Outside, the hanging garden sighed in the wind. The vines rustled softly, their leaves brushing against the stone like pages of an unseen book, ancient and unread. Guards walked the walls slowly, their torches casting long shadows. They peered out into the desert, watching the emptiness, as if it might one day whisper something back. The city below pulsed, with silence, a living stillness. From the hum of markets to the whisper of leaves, Babylon's rhythm faded into a lullaby, older than history itself. Night had fully come, and yet the city felt awake in another way, dreaming, perhaps, remembering itself through every sound, scent, and soft flicker of fire. And as the moon drifted high above the ziggurat's crown, Babylon slept timeless, vast, and alive, a heartbeat preserved in clay and wind for those who still dream of it. The sun lingers high above Babylon, painting the Euphrates in molten gold. Merchants rest beneath shaded awnings, sipping watered wine as they count their morning earnings, listening to the hum of the city breathe. Children chase each other through narrow alleys, their laughter echoing off mud-brick walls, while mothers hang washed linen to dry. The scent of baked bread drifts between doorways like a soft, invisible thread. A priest walks solemnly toward the temple of Marduk, his robes trailing dust. The air carries faint traces of incense, sweet and heavy, mingling with the distant calls of hawkers selling figs and honey. At the city's heart, a scribe leans over a clay tablet, carefully pressing wedge-shaped signs. He pauses, lifts his stylus, and listens to the rhythm of footsteps beyond his courtyard gate. Somewhere in the shade, a musician plucks the strings of a lyre. The melody is slow, like water rolling over smooth stone, telling stories of kings, storms, and gods long silent. In another corner of Babylon, a young potter kneads clay, shaping bowls that will hold the city's next feast. His hands move with quiet certainty, guided by the same tradition his father taught him. The walls of Babylon, towering and proud, shimmer under the afternoon sun. Travelers from distant lands marvel at their scale, whispering that no city on earth could match such grandeur. Inside homes, women grind grain while children nap on woven mats. The low hum of daily labor fills the air, steady and soft, like a heartbeat, keeping time with the city's pulse. Farmers return from the fields beyond the gates, their carts creaking under bundles of barley and dates. Dust clings to their skin, yet their smiles are calm. This was a good harvest. By the riverbank, fishermen mend their nets. They talk about the water's moods, how it rises and falls like a living creature, unpredictable yet generous to those who respect it. The shadows lengthen across Babylon's streets. The once vivid sounds of day fade to murmurs, footsteps, laughter, and the rustle of palm leaves brushing against stone courtyards. At the ziggurat's base, priests prepare offerings. Oil lamps flicker in the dusk as chants begin a low, rolling chorus that carries upward into the glowing sky. Within a scholar's chamber, scrolls and tablets are stacked neatly along the walls. He studies the stars through a narrow window, mapping patterns that seem older than time itself. Near the gate, soldiers lean on their spears, trading stories from the day. They speak of travelers, of merchants from Persia, and of rumors that distant empires stir again. The city glows beneath torchlight. Market stalls close one by one, their wares tucked away for morning. The scent of cooked lentils and roasted lamb fills the air like a quiet celebration. Families gather on rooftops, seeking the cool breath of night. They talk softly, sharing tales of ancestors who once walked the same streets under the same eternal stars. In the palace gardens, noblemen stroll beneath flowering vines. They discuss politics in hushed tones, yet pause often to admire the moon's reflection in the water basins. The river hums beneath the city walls, its surface shimmering like a mirror of gold. Somewhere, a poet recites verses to a small crowd, his words drifting like smoke through the night. Inside small homes, lamps are lit. Mothers tell stories of gods and monsters to their children. Stories that will be told again 100 generations from now. A sense of peace settles over Babylon. It is the quiet of a city alive in every corner, breathing, dreaming, remembering the days when God still walked among men. The scribe from earlier sets down his stylus, stretching his fingers. Outside, the moonlight spills through his doorway, illuminating the fresh tablet like a blessing from the heavens. He steps outside, gazing at the stars above. The constellations glimmer, the same ones that guided kings, shepherds, and travelers since the world began to record itself. In the distance, a chorus of frogs sings along the riverbank. The night feels endless, woven from sound and shadow, as though Babylon itself hums a lullaby to its people. A soft wind carries the scent of the Euphrates through open windows. It stirs the oil lamps, dances through scrolls, and whispers to the city. Tomorrow will come again. The moon rises higher, its light kissing the ziggurat's peak. There, a solitary priest offers a final prayer for the night. A prayer that the gods will keep Babylon safe. As he bows, his reflection shimmers faintly in a pool of water. The ripples distort his image, blending man, stone, and star into one timeless moment. Far below, the city sleeps. Only the watchmen remain awake, their silhouettes framed against the glow of distant fires. Babylon, eternal, breathes in unison with the stars. Eben, in sleep. The city murmurs. Carts creak. A dog barks. A dreamer sighs. All of it folds into the rhythm of existence, ancient and unbroken. The river's song deepens through the night. Its current glides along the walls that have seen empires rise and fall, carrying whispers of forgotten names. The scribe finally lies down, his mind heavy with words. He dreams of temples, of stories unwritten, of gods who once demanded ink and faith in equal measure. The night deepens. 1,000 tiny flames flicker across rooftops, like stars scattered upon the earth. The city seems to float, half awake, half eternal. Somewhere, a bell rings softly from the temple tower. The sound echoes through narrow streets, marking another hour lost to time. The scent of rain lingers, though no cloud appears. Babylon feels suspended, neither past nor present. Only a moment carved between dream and memory. A cat wanders across an empty courtyard. Its paws leave no trace on the sand, only a brief shimmer as it passes beneath a hanging lantern. Within the palace, servants move quietly, clearing dishes and extinguishing lamps. The last voices fade, replaced by the hush of the great stone halls. Above them all, the ziggurat glows in the starlight. It stands as both monument and mystery. A stairway between earth and heaven where prayers meet silence. Time feels different here. Each second lingers, long enough to remember, long enough to forget. The night teaches patience to even the restless heart. By dawn, the horizon burns with amber light. Babylon stirs again, its dreams dissolving into smoke and song. Life resumes the same, yet forever changed. The city wakes, but something of the night remains. A whisper, perhaps, or a promise that Babylon will live as long as someone remembers its stories. The first cries of merchants pierce the morning air. Children stretch in the warmth, and the city's endless cycle begins anew. Ancient, sacred, unstoppable. A priest greets the sunrise with open hands. He breathes deeply, eyes closed, as if feeling the gods stir once more in the rising light. The Euphrates shimmers again, calm and eternal. It carries the reflections of temples, towers, and hearts, each one bound to the rhythm of this ancient city. And so Babylon continues, a world within a world, where daily life becomes history, and history becomes myth, whispered into eternity's quiet ear. The night settles softly over the ruins of time, and as stars shimmer faintly above the desert, the old stories rise again, whispers of structures so magnificent they defied belief. The ancient world had its own constellation of marvels, scattered across lands and ages. Some stood for centuries, others disappeared like sand through an open hand, leaving only wonder in their wake. To live among these wonders must have been extraordinary. To wake each morning knowing that your city held something the world would remember forever, even if names and empires faded away. The hanging gardens, for instance, were said to bloom in terraces spilling green over stone, defying the dry Babylonian heat, as though the gods themselves watered them. And beyond Babylon's shimmering horizon, other miracles rose, colossal statues, temples of perfect symmetry, towers that kissed the edge of the heavens, all built by human hands, craving immortality. Travelers might have whispered about them in dim taverns, each tale exaggerated by firelight, each listener dreaming of seeing even one before their lifetime slipped quietly into memory. The pyramids of Egypt were already ancient, then great, silent mountains of stone, their angles slicing through desert light, each block a hymn carved for eternity. Then there was the Temple of Artemis, a gleaming masterpiece. Ephesus. It was said that when the sun hit its marble, it glowed like a second dawn rising from the earth. Imagine the sound of sandals on marble floors, the echo of prayers spoken softly between towering columns, where faith and artistry met in a harmony beyond reason. In distant Greece, the statue of Zeus stood tall, sculpted with such precision it seemed alive, every curve of muscle whispering divine perfection into mortal hearts. There were those who journeyed for months to glimpse it, only to stand speechless before its golden gaze, struck dumb by something words could never fully hold. Across the Aegean, on the island of Rhodes, rose a giant unlike any other, a bronze guardian so tall ships sailed between his legs, the sun glinting off his surface like fire. The Colossus of Rhodes, they called him, a symbol of resilience after war, his presence promising that light could return even after cities had crumbled. Some said he smiled faintly as the waves rolled in, others that his eyes were cast to the horizon, forever watching the dawn he was forged to greet. And then there was the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, divine, more personale tomb built for love, where stone became memory and grief turned to something achingly beautiful. Each wonder carried its own kind of silence, a sacred stillness that made people lower their voices, as though the air itself held reverence for human ambition. The lighthouse of Alexandria, too, burned through the night like a beacon of knowledge and navigation, its light cutting through fog, calling ships home from the edge of the unknown. Some sailors swore it spoke to them, that its flame flickered in rhythm with their hearts, reminding them that civilization, however fragile, was still there to welcome them back. And then there was Babylon, not just a city, but a dream built of brick and myth, where the earth rose in terraces, each layer whispering green against the sky. Travelers described vines cascading like waterfalls, trees growing where no tree should, the scent of flowers carried by wind through the dry desert, a miracle of engineering and devotion. Yet even among these wonders, there was melancholy. For every tower raised, time waited patiently beside it, knowing that someday even stone must yield to dust. The ancients seemed to understand this, perhaps better than we do. Their monuments were not defiance, but conversation between humans and eternity, between what is built and what is lost. Some scholars believe the list of 7 wonders was never meant as a catalogue of achievement, but a meditation, a reminder of how fleeting greatness truly is. The 7 wonders were more than stone and marble. They were prayers written in architecture, the longing of humanity to touch the infinite for just a moment. The hanging gardens, whether real or imagined, captured that longing best to paradise, built by mortal hands, suspended between heaven and earth, beautiful enough to break the heart. No record survives of what it truly looked like. But that Asanti stopped artists, dreamers, and storytellers from painting it in their minds for thousands of years. Perhaps that's the true wonder, not the garden itself, but the endurance of imagination, the quiet human refusal to forget what might have been. The same could be said for the other 6. They live on in words, in fragments, in the deep pulse of history that hums beneath every ruin. Each generation adds its own layer of myth, softening the edges, polishing the stories until they gleam again, ready to inspire new dreamers who will never see the originals. The wonders remind us that humans have always reached upward, chasing beauty, chasing permanence, even while knowing neither can ever truly last. A mason laying bricks by torchlight might have thought the same thing centuries ago, glancing up at the stars and wondering if anyone would remember his work. The sculptor carving Zeus's face might have whispered a prayer to the gods, asking him, not for power, but for the chance that his creation would outlive his name. And maybe that's what connects them all. The gardens, the temples, the statues, and the towers, each one an echo of that timeless desire to leave something behind. In Babylon, that desire grew wild, watered by ambition and myth. They said the gardens could be seen from miles away, their terraces shimmering like emerald waves in the heat. The workers who tended them might have felt both pride and exhaustion, their lives entwined with the roots of plants, older than their names. The citizens below might have pointed upward in awe, the way we look at skyscrapers now, marveling at the impossible turned ordinary by human hands. Even those who doubted the garden's existence couldn't deny the power of the idea garden in the sky, thriving where nature said it shouldn't. Maybe that's what the wonders were really about. Not proof, not records, but the art of believing in beauty, even when there's no evidence left behind. The ancients built with hope, and when their works fell, that same hope became legend, a softer kind of immortality that stone could never promise. In the end, it doesn't matter which wonders truly stood and which was stories. What matters is that they made people dream. And dreaming, too, is a form of creation. Perhaps we still chase those same dreams today, just in different shapes: steel towers, digital monuments, stories whispered to help us fall asleep. Each one is its own wonder, fragile but enduring. A reminder that the human spirit never really stopped building, even after the old marvels crumbled. And so, as night deepens over the ancient lands, one can almost hear the echoes of hammers and prayers, mingling in the dark, proof that wonder never dies. It only changes form. Imagine walking through the grand entrance of the Great Pyramid, where the air is heavy with the scent of dust and time. Each step echoes against walls carved thousands of years ago. You pause, tracing the stones with your fingertips, realizing that human hands once placed every block. The enormity of it all makes you feel small, yet strangely connected to eternity. The same sense of awe follows you to Babylon, where terraces once bloomed in the desert. You can almost hear the rustle of leaves and the trickle of water flowing from hidden aqueducts. The Greeks' wonders were more than structures. They were a reflection of divine craftsmanship. Each was seen as a bridge between mortal hands and the perfection of the gods. The statue of Zeus, for instance, stood not merely as a monument, but as a declaration of faith. His ivory face gleamed with gold, his eyes seeming almost alive in the flickering torchlight. To stand before him must have felt like standing in the presence of a god. People traveled across continents just to glimpse his gaze, and left changed by the experience. At Ephesus, the Temple of Artemis shone under the moonlight, its white marble pillars soared skyward, a silent testament to both devotion and artistry. Even ruins can still whisper her name. The lighthouse of Alexandria pierced through fog and shadow, its flame guiding sailors home. It was more than a structure. It was hope, a promise carved in stone and light. Yet time is relentless. Earthquakes, wars, and tides reduced most wonders to fragments. What remains are only echoes, stone, dust, and legend, carried forward by those who remember. But even ruins have power. They remind us that greatness is temporary, yet inspiration eternal. The wonders may have fallen, but the wonder itself, the O, still lives within us. Some scholars say the ancient world's obsession with monuments was born from a fear of forgetting. They built to outlast mortality, to write their stories in stone against the erasure of time. Each wonder, then, was a love letter to permanence, a defiance of decay. In a world ruled by death and empire, stone became their prayer for immortality. Yet, even as empires fell, their stories endured. The Greeks named 7 wonders, but countless more lay scattered, unnamed, waiting for rediscovery beneath centuries of dust. The Colossus of Rhodes, though long gone, once guarded its harbor like a silent titan. Ships passed between its feet, awed by its impossible scale and the courage it took to build it. How must it have felt to be a sculptor then, to stand before a vision larger than life, knowing that your work might be remembered long after your name was forgotten? In a way, every wonder was an act of storytelling. Each stone, a sentence. Each structure, a chapter in humanity's unending book. And those stories still whisper to us through the ruins. Think of the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, where a queen built a tomb so beautiful it became eternal. Love and grief carved into marble, proof that emotion itself could become architecture. Travel further to Olympia, 2 temples filled with statues and songs. Here, beauty was worship, and craftsmanship divine. Even athletes, competing under the sun, felt like offerings to the gods. Then to the hanging gardens, lush and impossible, where vines cascaded like rivers of green. Whether real or myth, they remind us that nature itself was once a wonder humanity tried to shape. Each wonder bore the fingerprints of ambition, a desire to touch something eternal. Whether carved in stone, built on water, or imagined through myth, they all shared one thing: longing. Longing to be remembered. Longing to defy time. Longing to prove that humans, fragile and finite, could still create something divine. That was the true spirit behind every wonder, and perhaps that spirit has never truly died. For even today, our cities rise like echoes of the ancients, towers of glass and steel reaching for the same sky that watched over Babylon. Each skyline tells the same story: humanity building toward eternity, one wonder at a time. The tools have changed, but the dream remains untouched. Even the ruins of those ancient marvels inspire us still. Every archaeologist's brushstroke uncovers not just stone, but memory. The heartbeat of civilizations refusing to fade. For some, the ancient wonders are a map, a trail of breadcrumbs left by those who came before us, each one marking where imagination overcame impossibility. So when you think of the 7 wonders, don't picture them as relics. Think of them as dreams frozen in time, waiting for someone, maybe you, to remember them once more. Because every wonder, from pyramid to temple, was once just an idea, a whisper that began in someone's mind before it ever touched stone. And that whisper still echoes today. The ancients built with stone, but we build with memory. Every story told, every ruin studied, becomes a continuation of their eternal work. A reminder that nothing truly ends. The world may change, but the desire to leave a mark does not. It is what binds us to those who built the wonders, and to those who will build the next. So perhaps the true wonder of the ancient world isn't what they built. It's the fact that we still remember, that their vision, though crumbled, continues to light the path ahead. If you listen closely, you can still hear it. The murmur of stone, the whisper of forgotten architects, the promise that beauty, once created, never truly disappears. The wonders of the ancient world were not merely monuments. They were the heartbeat of civilization, proof that even in ruins, humanity can still reach toward the divine. And as you close your eyes, imagine standing once more beneath their shadow, the sun setting, the wind stirring dust, and the ancient world breathing softly through time's embrace. The wonders may have fallen, but their spirit remains. It lives in every artist, every dreamer, and every person who dares to build something beautiful, even in the face of decay, because in the end, the true wonder was never stone or marble or gold. It was us, the builders, the believers, the storytellers, reaching for forever, one dream at a time. Before Babylon was a place on a map, it was a dream carved in myth. Its towers were said to touch the heavens, its gods walked among mortals, and its stories shaped empires. The city's name still carries a sense of awe. Babylon, the gate of the gods. To the ancients, it was more than a city. It was the axis where heaven met earth. They said its streets were laid out under divine instruction, every brick blessed by sacred ritual. The Euphrates River ran through it like a silver vein, carrying life and legend alike. At its heart stood the great ziggurat, the Ethamananki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. It was said to rise in 7 layers, mirroring the steps to the divine. Priests ascended its terraces carrying offerings, their chants rising into the sky like smoke. To onlookers below, it seemed as though the gods themselves might descend to listen. Many believe this tower inspired one of humanity, Esol the Tower of Babel, a story of ambition, unity, and divine punishment, woven into the memory of mankind. In this story, humanity spoke one language and sought to build a tower that reached heaven. But the gods, jealous of mortal pride, shattered their speech and scattered them across the earth. That tale, whether true or myth, captures something essential about Babylon. Its defiance, its ambition, its yearning to touch eternity, even at the risk of divine wrath. But the myths of Babylon were not only about pride, they were about balance. The world, to them, was a constant struggle between chaos and order, embodied in their gods and stories. At the dawn of all things, there was Tiamat, the dragon of the sea, embodiment of chaos and primordial darkness. From Erbudi, the world itself was said to be born. Marduk, Babylon's patron god, rose to challenge Tiamat. Armed with the winds and the storm, he fought her in a cosmic battle that shook heaven and earth. When he triumphed, he split her body in 2. Half became the sky, half the land. From her remains, he fashioned the order of the world, binding chaos beneath creation. This myth, the Enuma Elish, was more than a story. It was Babylon's cosmic charter, proof that their city stood at the center of divine order and human destiny. Each year, during the New Year festival, priests recited this tale in grand ceremony. As they did, they reaffirmed Marduk's reign and Babylon's role as the heart of civilization. The people believed their city was chosen, not built, a reflection of the heavens themselves. To walk through its gates was to step into the blueprint of the universe. Even the hanging gardens, if they existed, were seen as a divine imitation. Paradise itself, reborn in stone, water, and leaf, where gods might wander among mortals unseen. Babylonian myth blurred the lines between heaven and earth, history and legend. Every structure, every ritual, every story carried a layer of both truth and mystery. They spoke of gods who fell in love with mortals, of stars that wept, and of rivers that remembered the voices of the dead. In Babylon, even silence had meaning. The priests were not just keepers of temples, they were interpreters of dreams, readers of stars. The night sky above Babylon glittered with divine language, and they alone could read it. Through astrology and omens, they believed the gods communicated their will. Every eclipse, every strange bird in flight, every shift in the wind held cosmic significance. To them, fate was not fixed, but written across the heavens, waiting to be read. Babylon's kings ruled not by power alone, but by divine permission inscribed in the stars. The myths gave them purpose, a framework that made every flood, every drought, every victory part of a greater celestial design. The city's heartbeat pulsed in rhythm with the cosmos. Even ordinary life was touched by the divine. Farmers prayed to river gods before planting. Merchants offered coins to the spirits of the road, and mothers whispered blessings to Ishtar for protection. Ishtar, goddess of love and war, embodied Babylon. Isid dwell nature, beautiful and terrible. She could bring both passion and destruction, fertility and ruin. One of her most famous myths tells of her descent into the underworld, seeking to rescue her lover. Each gate she passed stripped her of power until she stood naked before death. Only through sacrifice and renewal did she rise again, bringing with her the promise of spring and the return of life. Babylon saw in her the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Ishtar's story was more than myth. It was metaphor. It spoke of the human heart's resilience, of hope reborn from despair, of life defying the darkness again and again. And perhaps that was Babylon's greatest legend of all. Its ability to rise anew, even after ruin, echoing Ishtar's own journey from shadow to light. From the chaos of myth, Babylon built meaning. From the dust of fallen gods, they forged wisdom. Their stories became the foundation upon which all later civilizations would build. The myths of Babylon didn't just explain the world, they enchanted it. They gave reason to the stars, soul to the stones, and divine purpose to every breath of mortal life. Even as centuries passed, their tales endured, whispered through Greek scholars, woven into biblical texts, carried into the fabric of Western myth itself. Babylon's legends became humanity's shared inheritance. Whether we realize it or not, we still walk beneath the shadow of their stories, the echoes of gods who once ruled the dawn. For in every tale of paradise lost, of towers built too high, of floods and gods and forbidden love, there, somewhere, is Babylon's voice, still telling us who we are. And as the sands shift over its buried ruins, the myths remain untouched, eternal as the stars that once watched over the city that dared to dream of heaven. They say myths never truly die. They simply adapt, changing shape as time demands. So too did Babylon's legends survive, cloaked in new languages, reshaped by new storytellers. When the Persians conquered Babylon, its temples fell quiet, but its myths seeped into the conqueror's own beliefs. Marduk's power was echoed in Ahura Mazda, the great god of light. Later, when Alexander the Great stood among the ruins, he too felt the weight of Babylon's stories. It is said he tried to rebuild at Ziggurat, but death claimed him before the work began. Yet even in ruin, the city's spirit lived on. Greek historians called it the City of Wonders, a place where gods once dined among mortals and wisdom flowed like the river's tide. In their retellings, Babylon's myths transformed. Ishtar became Aphrodite, Marduk became Zeus, and the Tower of Babel reappeared as tales of divine punishment for human pride. The stories wandered far from their homeland, crossing deserts and oceans, whispered in temples, copied in scrolls, told by candlelight through centuries of retelling. Even the Bible carried Babylon's name, not as a city of glory, but of warning, a symbol of corruption, ambition, and the fall of those who sought to rival heaven. Babylon the Great, the book of Revelation called it a mother of abominations, a far cry from the sacred heart of wisdom its people once believed it to be. Yet that dual image, divine and damned, luminous and doomed, gave Babylon an immortal place in human memory. No other ancient city haunts our imagination quite the same way. It stands at the intersection of myth and morality, a mirror for our own desires and downfalls. To dream of Babylon is to dream of human greatness and its consequences. In later centuries, writers and poets revived its myths. They painted it as both paradise and perdition, a city of gardens and sins, where beauty and danger walked hand in hand. Painters imagined Ishtar with wings of gold, descending upon ruins washed in moonlight. Musicians composed hymns that echoed the ancient rhythms of its priests' chants. Archaeologists, centuries later, unearthed fragments of its walls, cuneiform tablets, and shards of glazed brick that once gleamed with lions, dragons, and bulls. Each discovery whispered, "We were real." Among the ruins, they found the stories etched in clay myths of heroes, prophecies of kings, hymns to forgotten gods, words written thousands of years ago, yet still speaking. Every tablet was a voice resurrected, every symbol a fragment of a lost conversation between humanity and the divine. In their silence, Babylon still told its stories. Even today, we invoke its name without realizing it. In tales of lost paradise, in metaphors of ambition undone, in warnings about the cost of pride and progress. When modern cities rise too fast, people still say they've built another Babylon. Beautiful, vast, and doomed to crumble under its own splendor. The myths remind us that greatness comes with a price, that to climb too high invites the storm, that every civilization carries within it the seeds of its own fall. But they also remind us of our resilience. The same spirit that built ziggurats, carved rivers, and planted hanging gardens in the desert. Perhaps that's the true legacy of Babylon's myths, not as cautionary tales, but as eternal echoes of human striving, of our refusal to stop reaching for the heavens. When we tell these stories, we don't just remember Babylon. We become it again, dreamers chasing the divine, builders stacking hope upon dust. Each retelling is a rebirth. Each listener becomes part of the myth. Babylon may have fallen in stone, but it still stands in every curious heart that wonders what once was. Look closely at the stars tonight. The same constellations that guided Babylon's priests still burn above you, whispering the same truths in a different age. Their light has crossed millennia to reach your eyes. The same light that once shimmered over the gardens, the shimmering waters of the Euphrates. And if you listen closely, perhaps you'll hear the faint echo of drums, the chant of forgotten priests, the rustle of palm leaves stirred by the desert wind. That is the breath of Babylon, the heartbeat of myth that refuses to die, pulsing quietly beneath the sands of history. Because myths, like civilizations, are never truly lost. They just wait for someone to remember. Someone to listen. Someone like you. So as you drift deeper into this tale, remember this. Babylon was not just a city. It was a question the world is yet to answer. What do we build when we seek eternity? And what happens when we find it? Its ruins whisper an answer both beautiful and terrible. That every empire is a prayer written in dust. And every story, a bridge between gods and men. The hanging gardens may have wilted, the temples may have fallen, but the myths endure lush, unbroken, and eternal, looming in the mind of every dreamer. And perhaps that's the truest miracle of Babylon, that thousands of years later, under different skies, we are still talking about it. Still wondering if the gods were listening. Still hoping, somehow, that paradise might rise again from the sand. Because as long as we tell their stories, Babylon still breathes not in brick or stone, but in the endless garden of human imagination. Imagine if the hanging gardens of Babylon had survived tier upon tier of green paradise, still standing under the same blazing sun that once kissed its marble terraces. What would it look like today? Would it be fenced off, guarded by archaeologists and cameras, or open to the world as a wonder reborn, shimmering in the modern light like a memory made real? Tourists might queue along the Euphrates, their phones lifted toward the cascades of vines and flowers that hang like waterfalls of emerald and gold. You'd hear the distant hum of drones, not bees, circling to capture the spectacle humankind's oldest dream, finally proven true. Imagine standing there, feeling the cool mist rising from the hidden aqueducts that still feed the roots, the same ancient system, somehow alive after all this time. It would smell of jasmine and damp stone, of history and rebirth, a living museum that needs no labels, no plaques, only silence, obi and wind. If the gardens still existed, they would change how we see our past. Proof that legend can live, that not everything humanity builds must vanish into sand. Students would study not just its architecture, but its endurance. A triumph of imagination that defied both drought and time itself. Scientists would trace its irrigation lines, marveling at ancient engineers who mastered water as if they'd been speaking its secret language. And poets, sitting beneath its trees, would find words slipping from their pens like falling petals, slow, gentle, inevitable. But perhaps it would not stay untouched. Progress has a habit of mistaking wonder for opportunity. Skyscrapers might rise beside it, glass reflecting greenery and silent irony. Souvenir shops would bloom along the edges, selling bottled Babylonian air and postcards of paradise. Still, even with the crowds and noise, something ancient would stir among the leaves. The same quiet that once lulled queens and dreamers to sleep. Because beauty, no matter how surrounded, still commands reverence, even in a noisy world. we would lower our voices before such a sight. And perhaps, standing there, people would begin to wonder if this survived. What else might we have lost to flame, to war? 2 times indifference. The Hanging Gardens would be more than a relic. They would be a mirror, showing us the cost of forgetting and the reward of remembrance. Its terraces would cast shadows across the centuries, reminding us that our ancestors were not primitives, but visionaries, artists of water, stone, and dream. In their roots, you could trace the first threads of modern life. Irrigation, architecture, design, all born from the longing to make paradise touch the earth. If the gardens survived, Babylon would be reborn as the heart of wonder once more. Pilgrims from every land would come to stand in its shade. They would feel small beneath its vastness, yet connected, as if each leaf whispered, "You too are part of this long, impossible story." Scholars would debate how it endured: divine protection, buried aquifers, or simply luck. But perhaps endurance itself would be the answer. Because to survive is a kind of miracle one humankind and its creations share. Like us, the gardens would bear the scars of history and still bloom. Children would laugh beneath its dripping vines, their voices echoing against the same walls that once heard the steps of kings. At night, lanterns would glow among the leaves, their light mingling with starlight, like earth and heaven shaking hands again. And maybe, under that quiet glow, someone would sit alone at the edge of a terrace, looking down through the layers of time. They'd think of Semiramis, or Nebuchadnezzar, or the nameless gardeners who tended every leaf, never knowing their work would echo through eternity. Each vine, each blossom, would be a prayer answered across millennia. Proof that even myths can grow roots deep enough to reach us. And yet, perhaps its greatest beauty would not be in its survival, but in the questions it would ask. What have we built that will last so long? Would our own creations inspire awe or pity? Would they invite reflection or regret? The Hanging Gardens, still alive, would challenge us to rethink progress, to measure greatness not by height, but by harmony. Its waterfalls would whisper that the most advanced civilizations are those that learn to nurture, not conquer. And maybe, just maybe, we would listen. As the sun sets over the terraces, painting the sky in amber and violet, the world would pause, just for a moment, to remember where wonder began. For in the heart of Babylon, where myth became memory, and memory became truth, humanity would rediscover its oldest secret, that beauty and knowledge were never separate things. They were always the same garden. By nightfall, the Hanging Gardens would transform into a cathedral of moonlight. The air would shimmer with soft mist, and the rustling of leaves would sound like ancient prayers. Lanterns would flicker along the pathways, each one a tiny echo of forgotten constellations. The night breeze would carry the scent of blooming lilies, mingled with the deep hum of hidden water. If you stood there, gusting upward, you'd see the terraces rising like steps to the heavens, a staircase of life itself, built from stone, soil, and human longing. The sound of the city would fade away below. Time would slow. You'd feel as though you were suspended between ages, half in the past, half in a dream. Perhaps a musician would sit under the palms, plucking soft notes on a lyre, the melody curling into the air like incense. Even silence, here, would sound musical. Somewhere in the distance, a child might laugh. The same kind of laughter that once echoed when Babylon was young, carried now through generations of dust and dream. The stars would lean closer, reflected in the pools that shimmered between the terraces. The gardens would not just mirror the heavens, they would become them. And in that stillness, standing beneath a canopy of vines and starlight, you might realize this is not merely a monument of the past, but a message that the human spirit never stopped building, never stopped reaching for beauty, even when the world around it fell. Each leaf would whisper stories of those who watered it, of those who dreamed of paradise and refused to let the desert win. The ancient stones beneath your feet would hum with memory. If you listened long enough, you might hear the footsteps of those who once walked here. Queens, scholars, laborers, dreamers. They would not speak in words, but in sensations. The coolness of water, the warmth of sunlight on brick, the fragrance of jasmine in the dusk. Because some memories are too vast for language. They exist only in the air, in the rhythm of life that keeps pulsing through the centuries. And as you breathe it in, you'd feel the thin line between myth and truth blur until both are one. Maybe that's the real miracle. Not that the gardens existed, but that they still exist within us. Reborn every time someone wonders if they were real. Each time we imagine them, we rebuild them. Bine bi bine, brick by brick, heart by heart. In that way, they have never truly died. They've only changed shape, from terraces of stone to landscapes of imagination. They live in every artist who paints paradise, in every architect who dreams in green, in every person who plants something small and believes it might last. If the hanging gardens still stood, they would not just remind us of what was, but of what still can be a balance between humanity and nature, ambition and peace. And perhaps, in some distant corner of time, they still do. Hidden, waiting, blooming, quietly beyond the reach of history, as if guarding the last pure fragment of wonder. Because the gardens were never just a place. They were a promise that we can turn even the harshest world into something living, breathing, and beautiful. If you close your eyes, you can still see it. Terraces glistening with dew, birds gliding between waterfalls, the faint glow of torches dancing against stone. You can almost hear the gardeners moving softly through the mist, tending to eternity itself. Somewhere, between dream and memory, the hanging gardens of Babylon are still alive. And perhaps they always will be. The last vine never truly withered. It just grew inward, twining itself around our imagination, rooting deep in the soil of every curious soul. And so, when you think of Babylon, don't just remember the ruins. Remember the resilience, the will to create beauty against the odds. For that, more than the walls or the water, is what truly makes it eternal. And as you drift now, listening to the echoes of history's garden, let your mind wander through its terraces one last time. Hear the soft rush of the waterfall. Feel the cool air brushing against your skin. Smell the distant scent of herbs and earth. You are walking where kings once dreamed, where myths were born, where paradise was not imagined, but made. The story of the Hanging Gardens is not just a tale of loss. It is proof that wonder never dies. It only waits for us to notice again. So, close your eyes, traveler of time. Let the whispers of Babylon lull you into quiet peace. For in your dreams tonight, the gardens bloom once more bright, eternal, and alive beneath the stars.